the entire video, we are going to look at cards from Phyrexia All Will Be One that have not yet been officially revealed. There was a giant leak. If you are just here to be mad at me about covering leaks, that's fine. Go down into the comments, let me know you're mad at me, and then after you leave, I want you to Google leak versus investigative journalism. Let's get into it.
Highest level of gratitude to our patrons who power the channel through Patreon. Check out the Patreon link in the description to learn about monthly giveaways, VIP Discord access, and even our official playmat.
Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I'm Edward Snowden. We are going to cover the Phyrexia All Will Be One leaks. We've got 3 different posts from the Magic TCG subreddit, and I believe that it is only responsible to know what information is out there, especially when you're concerned with the financial aspect of the game, so that you can act accordingly. Jake and I haven't officially come back from vacation. We'll be kicking it off within the next couple of weeks, but if you want to support our efforts over 2023 to make better videos, better streams, and to eventually do this as our full-time job, go check out our Patreon. We would love your support. Let's take a look at some leaks. We have got 3 different posts on the subreddit to go through here, and there are quite a few cards. Phyrexia All Will Be One, so we're just going to go ahead and jump into it. Miglaw's Maze Crusher, a green, a red, and 1 for a legendary Frixian Beast, 4/4. Enters a battlefield with 5 oil counters on it. A couple of the cards that I read have this oil counter mechanic. It'll be interesting to see if there are cards that will add oil counters to creatures, because a lot of the synergies that they have with those counters have them removing them so that they can have abilities like Miglaw's. Pay 1, remove an oil counter, it gains Vigilance and Menace. Pay 2, remove 2 oil counters, it gets +2/+2. Pay 3, remove 3. You get to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. I like a 3-mana 4/4. You've got these oil counters. If there are ways to reliably fit Miglaw's back up with oil counters, this could be a really good card. But regardless, you're going to get at least the activation of a destroy target artifact or enchantment plus a +2/+2 or a Vigilance and Menace twice if that's the route you want to go. The Seed Core represents a new land type. Land, you see that subtype Sphere. Add a colorless, or you add a mana of any color only to cast Phyrexian creature spells. This is definitely going into my Phyrexian tribal deck. And it also has Corrupted. Tap, target 1/1 creature gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Activate only if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. So yes, here we go. Poison is back. It's back in the form of Infect. It's back in the form of things like Corrupted. And I know that all of the Infect cards are going to pop like crazy. You need to be on the lookout for these. Either you got them in your notebooks and you don't want them, and so at the top of this spike, you maybe want to look at selling them, or you don't have them yet and you think you're going to want them. Don't go FOMO. This is only some leaks. We might have them reprinted in this set. You just want to keep your eye on it, and that's the point I really want to make. Argentum Masticore, 5 for a 5/5 Phyrexian Masticore. It's got first strike, protection from multicolor, which is kind of cool. At the beginning of your upkeep, sack Masticore unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. This seems like one of the best Masticores that I've ever seen. Most playable. I like that removal built into this. I like that, you know, it's completely colorless, so this can go into madness strategies. This can go into cycling strategies, anything where you're going to have residual synergy and the ability to take advantage of the fact that you're discarding cards, especially. That's where this kind of card is going to shine. Plus, love that phrase, destroy target non-land permanent. That has got a wide range of stuff that it hits. Venerated Rot Priest, our first poison counter creature we're going to talk about. 1 green for a 1/2 Phyrexian Druid. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell. That means that you can target Venerated Rot Priest with a pump spell, maybe, that's already run in a lot of constructed formats. Toxic 1, so players dealt combat damage by this creature also get a poison counter. That's kind of how they're getting around, you know, the very first version of poison counters, Infect, which is now with Toxic 1, doesn't matter what the power of Venerated Rot Priest is. It's kept at bay a little bit, right? You can't just super pump an Infect creature that got through versus Venerated Rot Priest, however much damage it's going to be dealing, it's going to be dropping 1 poison counter over there, and you're good to go. However, target this with a pump spell, and target opponent gets a poison counter. Target this with any spell, it gets a poison counter. Plus, it's got a little built-in protection if you want to look at it from the direction of the opponent casting that spell on it. Zenith Chronicler, 2 mana for a 3/1 Phyrexian construct. Whenever a player casts their first multicolor spell each turn, each other player draws a card. I personally would want to put this in like a monocolor deck because there's going to be a lot of players at the commander table playing multicolored spells. Now, this is going to help every other player than the player casting multicolor spells, but if you can make sure that it's always helping you and you can sort of build around it, maybe this is in a Rites of Flourishing style deck where it's just resource overload for your opponents and you're ready to take advantage of it. It's got a little bit of play, and I think that's cool. Thrawn is back. Hey-oh. Little bit different this time. 5 mana, 5/5, still can't be countered. Got trample. Can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. So it's sort of hexproof. It's hexproof with a little hole in the shield. And then as long as your turn, Thrawn has Undestructible. So we've got halvesy Undestructible, Indestructible, and non-green hole in a hexproof shield on Thrawn. Red Sun's Twilight, 2 red, X, destroy up to X target artifacts. If X is 5 or more, for each artifact destroyed this way, create a token that's a copy of it. Those tokens gain haste, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. Very cool. Get a single use out of your opponent's artifacts that you destroy on your turn. I'm also thinking we could activate our artifacts and then destroy them if we want. Get another token and we can use it again that turn. That's also a potential use of this, sort of backdoor use. But yeah, it's one of these destroy X target artifacts. We've got versions of this, but this one's got upside, so makes it a little more interesting in my opinion. Look what they did to our boy. Vencer is back and kind of a nightmare now. Lifelink Toxic 1, which we now know means they get 1 poison counter regardless of how much combat damage is done, as long as combat damage is being done. Whenever you proliferate, so there's that card, that keyword returning. You need to go look for cards with proliferate on them. If you have them and you don't want them, think of selling them. Same thing. Proliferate is coming back. Choose one. If you don't control a creature named the Hollow Sentinel, create the Hollow Sentinel, a legendary 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token, or target artifact creature you control gains flying and lifelink until end of turn. This seems more like a constructed card to me, but it seems like a possibly very good constructed card to me. Looking at that keyword, proliferate, you know that it's going to come back, and you know that those kind of cards, unless they're reprinted, are going to have little bumps because of poison coming back, because of poison counters being a thing again. Microsynth Gardens is a sphere land. Add a colorless, pay 1, filter into a color of any mana of any color, and then it can become a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. This is an interesting way to double up on artifacts in your commander deck. You can get a copy of it with Microsynth Gardens when you're done using it for the mana that you need it to be. Then you can make it one of your artifacts that you've got on the battlefield already. Get 2 Panharmonicons. That sounds pretty brutal. Get 2 copies of Bolas's Citadel on the battlefield or Great Henge on the battlefield. Absolutely ridiculous. But this could be a card that really plays well in artifact decks especially. White Sun's Twilight, 2 white and X. You gain X life, create X 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifacts, creature tokens with Toxic 1, and the creature can't block. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So Martial Glory, except it creates infect creatures. Whee! That'll be fun. Man, if you get this in limited, you should definitely 4-0 that night. Kethek Crucible Goliath, a red, a black, and 2 other for a 4/4 Phyrexian. At the beginning of your end step, you can sacrifice another creature, can be a token. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card with lesser mana value. You really don't want it to be a token. Put it onto the battlefield, then put the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's an interesting way of sort of randomly flipping into new stuff. You know, you got to sacrifice big creatures, and I don't know if you want to sacrifice bigger creatures to go and get smaller ones, but it could have a lot of value, especially in a sacrifice deck where you can recur it, or you're getting value from it being sacrificed anyway. Kethek is an interesting take on a Rakdos, sacrifice card. Eternal Wanderer, notably not completed. I know that there was the whole will they, won't they completion lineup of Planeswalkers. Eternal Wanderer seems like Our Wanderer friend is going to dodge the completion. But we've got an interesting Planeswalker in the meantime. 2 white, 4 other, so a 6-mana Walker. 5 loyalty, though. I like this passive text. No more than 1 creature can attack Eternal Wanderer each combat. That's pretty good. Especially when your +1 blinks an artifact or creature. Can be somebody else's, but you probably want to build in some synergies to get some enters the battlefield going again as you exile it and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. But if you are targeting your opponent's stuff, something being completely exiled until that player's next end step can be really disadvantageous for them. For 0, you're creating a protector, and I love planeswalkers that create protectors, especially when this one's got the ability to only let one thing attack it each combat. You get to create a 2/2 with double strike. Then -4 for each player. Choose a creature that player controls. Each player sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen this way. So you can do this right out of the gate, sort of a pseudo board wipe. 1 may stand on each board. You choose a creature for each player, and then each player sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen. Interesting. I like the power level of a 6-mana Walker here. You know, normally when you get up into that mana territory, you're not doing that great, but apparently occasionally rather some cards like Liliana Dreadhorde General can come out of it, and I'm not equating the two, but this one seems like it has a lot of strength. Conduit of Worlds is going to go along right next to Crucible of Worlds. 2 green for 2 green, 2 other for an artifact. You may play lands from your graveyard, then tap, choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you can cast that card, and if you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn, only at sorcery speed. Now, getting permanents back from the graveyard, wow. This can really set your opponents back, especially if they put a lot of effort into removing a very critical permanent on your board. Blackcleave Cliffs, notably, now we are going to have these fast lands in Pioneer. I think that's pretty interesting. Red-black one right there. Phyrexian Arena reprint. We know this card. The most notable piece of this card is the flavor text. For a bittersweet moment, Jace believed he could still save his love. A moment was all Vraska needed. Hail Hydra, she whispered. We smash cut then to Jace alone in a warehouse, and someone comes up to him and starts whispering, longing. Rusted. 17. Daybreak. Furnace. And he becomes the Winter Planeswalker. I don't know if that's what's actually going to happen, but Phyrexian Arena reprint. Pretty cool. Gotta like it. Dragonwing Glider. 2 red, 3 other. It's an equipment, and it has an ability called Firmiradan. I don't know how I feel about that. It's a little wonky for me having the exclamation point on the ability, but you know, pre-release weekend, it's going to be fun to yell Firmiradan. Maybe it's sort of like a living weapon from the first time that we went to New Phyrexia. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach it to it. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has flying and haste. So for 5 mana out of the gate, you're getting a 4/4 flying haster, and then you're getting an equipment left behind with a very steep equip cost that gets +2/+2 and has flying and haste. I don't think that this is going to be like the killer Firmiradan equipment, but I do think that there's probably going to be 1 or 2 Firmiradan equipments that are very good and will stand the test of time. Copperline Gorge, we got that reprint. Second one starts with Skler's Hive. 1 white, 1 other enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life and create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. Plus, if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control with Toxic have lifelink. Skler's Hive is very interesting. We've got a little infect version of Bitter Blossom. I believe that this will see play. I do believe that people will want to run this in a few decks. Kemba is back. Ka Endearing. 1 white, 1 other. Legendary Cat Cleric. Mono white, baby. Whenever it or another cat enters the battlefield under your control, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to that creature. Now, there's already a pretty big deck running around in Constructed that has to do with winning with Colossus Hammer. Whenever Kemba or another cat enters the battlefield under your control, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to that creature. Equipped creatures you control get +1/+1. That seems pretty decent in that deck. I'm going to have to go look at the people that play the constructed formats at the highest levels to make sure that my assessment is at least close here, at least worth trying out. But a 2-mana 2/2 that auto attaches an equipment with a really steep equipment cost to itself seems pretty good, especially if you can give it haste somehow. Then it's got a 5-mana ability that you can, it's a mana sink, you can use it as many times as you want to create a 2/2 cat, and you can trigger the abilities again. Brasks Forge, the red player in me loves this artifact. It's 3 mana for 1 red and 2 other. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you put an oil counter on it. Then you create an X1 red Frixian horror creature token with trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters on Brasks Forge. Sacrifice the token at the beginning of the next end step. This could get nutty, especially like I'm talking about earlier, if there's a way to put oil counters on things as we see the whole set. I really think that this could get out of hand pretty quickly unless it's answered. Evolve Spinoderm, 2 green, 2 other, 5/5 Frixian beast. Enters a battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. Evolve Spinoderm has trample as long as it has 2 or fewer oil counters on it. Otherwise, it has hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, you remove an oil counter from it, and then if there are no oil counters on it, you sacrifice it. I really think that we need to have some sort of ability here where we can like sack it to get extra value towards the end, because on that last upkeep we remove it, then if it has none of them we sack it. So we're going to get a hexproofing 5/5, then we're going to get a trampling 5/5, and then we have to sacrifice the creature. You should be able to win. It's a 5/5 as long as it's attacking through and really doing damage every turn. It's pretty brutal. But I don't think that this will be the best creature that we see that has this oil counter stuff. Karamonix, the Rat King. We're getting a lot of rats recently, aren't we? 2 black, 1 other, 3/3 Frixian rats. Got toxic 1 other rats you control have toxic 1. This is going in the commander deck that has rats in it. When it enters a battlefield, you look at the top 5 of your library, you reveal any number of rats and put them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. Seems like a solid rat. Ovika, Enigma Goliath, 7 mana, 6/6 Frixian Nightmare, flying, ward 3, pay 3 life. That's a pretty good ward. I like ward. Some of them are like whatever, but that's a pretty good ward. Lightning Bolt plus 3 mana. You can resolve this. Again, this is like a pre-release weekend dream pull, right? Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create X 1/1 red Frixian goblin creature tokens where X is the mana value and they gain haste. Okiva does a lot. It's also a lot of mana. It's just one of those cards, right? This is a big splashy sort of creature, but it's going to be a $1 rare most likely. Mercurial Spell Dancer. I don't think this is going to be a $1 rare. I think this has got some legs. A blue and 1 for a 2/1 can't be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put an oil counter on it. So there's sort of an internal way of getting oil counters onto something. Then we just need to use some shenanigans and move them around maybe. I don't know. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player and it can't be blocked, so it will be doing that, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery this turn, you copy it. And you can choose new targets for the copy. I think that this is pretty sweet. I think that this could see some play, maybe in a... I mean, it doesn't have infect, so it's not going to be in an infect deck or toxic, whatever it's called. But, you know, spell slinger decks can't be blocked. It's getting through. Blue-red is sort of a burn archetype color structure anyway. I think that this has some potential. You know, 2 lightning bolts just in a format that's got Mercurial Spell Dancer and Lightning Bolt. 2 lightning bolts, that seems like a lot getting through. You know, you're dealing 2, you're dealing 6 on top of that. That's 8 on the swing with a 2-drop. I think it might have some play. Tablet of Completion, 2 mana artifact. Tap it to put an oil counter on it. Nice, internal again. Tap, add a colorless, only if it has 2 or more oil counters on it. So if you get impatient or you just need the mana, want to ramp a little bit, you can use that. And then pay 1, draw a card, activate only if it has 5 or more oil counters on it. Having to say oil a lot is really difficult, it turns out. I like this kind of card, again, if there's a way that we can cheat oil counters onto it and sort of ramp up to it. Otherwise, Tablet of Completion, like, it's a great 2-drop. If you can drop it on turn 2, then you can start getting that counter rolling and tapping it. But waiting 5 turns for pay 1, draw a card, I don't know if that's really where we want to be. Maybe in a long game, you know, if you're dropping it early, then it's got some potential. But otherwise, it doesn't really excite me that much. Geth Thane of Contracts, 2 black, 1 other. Other creatures you control get -1/-1. It itself is a Phyrexian zombie that's 3/4. You pay its mana cost again to tap it and return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else, and this is only a sorcery speed ability. As a rule of thumb, returning a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield is about a 5 mana ability. Doing it for 3, even if it gets exiled after that, is really good, and I think that even though that has the downside of that -1/-1 to other creatures, I think that people will want to play this card. Actually, I'm pretty sure now that I think of it, this is definitely going to go in my Dahada Mardu Legendary Reanimator deck. This just seems like a shoe-in into that deck automatically. We see another one of the fast lands. Love having these, and now they're in Pioneer. Unctus, Grand Meditect, 3 mana for a 2/4 Phyrexian Vidalcan. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Little looting effect, I like that. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. All right, a little Anthem to boot. I'll take the extra text. And then you can pay a Phyrexian mana, a blue or 2 life. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types. Activate only as a sorcery. So backdooring something into having the artifact type is an ability that's been around forever, and there's a lot of synergies for it. So I think that this is another piece of those types of decks that people will end up, slotting into the 99. Norn's Wellspring, a white and 1 other for an artifact. Whenever a creature you control dies, scry 1, put an oil counter on the Wellspring. Pay 1, remove 2 oil counters, draw a card. It's fine. Doesn't really excite me a lot. Maybe in an Aristocrats commander deck, this could be good because it doesn't look for token or non-token. It just, any creature dies, you scry 1, you get an oil counter on it. And having those 2 oil counters turn into draw a card for pay 1, it could have some legs in the right kind of deck as long as you know what's happening. We've seen Spell Dancer. We haven't seen Blade of Shared Souls. 1 blue and 2 other for an artifact equipment that has Vermiridan, which means it creates a 2/2 and automatically attaches itself to it. Then whenever Blade of Shared Souls becomes attached to a creature, which automatically happens because of Vermiridan, for as long as Blade of Shared Souls remains detached to it, you may have that creature become a copy of another target creature you control, and it's got an equip cost of 2, which is pretty sweet. I like a repeatable clone effect. That's kind of cool. This is like a artifact clone that sits on the battlefield and can be used over and over again even after that creature dies. Pretty sweet, and I actually think that people are going to be very interested in getting this card into decks. This is probably my favorite creature so far that has the oil counter mechanic, and maybe one of my favorite creatures in the set. The art is just sick to me, and it's a good card to boot. 2 black, 2 other for a 6/6 flyer, Frixian Demon. It enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you remove an oil counter from it. Then if it has no oil counters on it, you lose the game. And it also has, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, its controller loses 2 life. This is very good. Somebody's going to figure out how to break this. I think that, like off the top of my head, the worst build, but possibly has play. You go with Cat Oven, you have Archfiend of the Dross. You can sacrifice Archfiend of the Dross when you're done with it. Past that, you get a 6/6 flyer for 4 mana. I think that it's got some legs. I would be very interested in brewing around it. This is the kind of card that really interests me in playing. Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut, 8 mana, 7/5. Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls. Other creatures you control have power and toughness 5/3 and are juggernauts in addition to their other creature types. This could be a nice little drop win con for a token creature deck. It has no color, so it can go in any of your token creature decks. But if you're creating a ton of 1/1s, this is sort of a different type of behemoth. Come in and just turn them all into 5/3s, swing with my army of 1/1s that you were kind of scared of, but are now all 5/3s, and you're very scared of them. 8 mana is a lot. This one could just be one of those rares that fades into obscurity, but it could, Craterhoof Behemoth is 8 mana, Graz is 8 mana. It's obviously not as good as Craterhoof, I'm not saying that, but it does have that potential. I built a Spirits deck with Millicent last year, and I was just flooding the skies, and I would try to drop something that's going to give them all +2/+2 or +3/+3, and that's how I would get those finishing blows going. Turning them all into 5/3s that fly, that'd be pretty sweet. That's at least one place I would say that card could go. Malera, the Living Cure. Malera is back, and she is Selesnya now, a white and green for 3/3. If you would get 1 or more poison counters, instead you get 1, and you can't get additional poison counters this turn. So this is their, breaker for poison counters. This is how we possibly stop that from getting too far in the meta. It's one card. Hopefully there's some more anti-tech against infect, against poison counters. Then you can also exile Malera to choose another target creature or artifact. When it's put into the graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. I like that you can choose an opponent's thing, so you could do a little political move in Commander or a necessary move to keep somebody from winning in Commander if you needed to, but at the very least you can return your own creature or artifact when it's put into a graveyard right to the battlefield just for exiling your 2-mana 3/3. Out of the command zone, this is probably kind of bad. You're not always going to run into poison, and the return is just like, it's kind of small beans, but being able to do it over and over again, possibly 2 mana the first time, 4 mana the second time, that's not bad, not terrible. But Malera being in there as a stoppage to poison counters in particular, that's a complete win, and I love it being there. Black Sun's Twilight, like this cycle so far, I think it's pretty interesting. A black and X, up to 1 target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. If X is 5 or more, return a creature with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This can be a nice little swing here. You're killing something that maybe even has indestructible, and you're returning your own thing. That's pretty cool, and it's instant speed too, so you could do it on their EOT. They've played something, you got some in your graveyard, I'm going to kill your thing, I'm going to return my thing my turn. That's a pretty good move. That can be a backbreaker. Our final post here has an imager link that's got a couple more cards that were in, this leak that weren't featured in the others. Vindictive Flame, Stoker's a 1-red, 1/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put an oil counter on it. Then 7 mana, sack it. You can discard your hand, draw 4, ability cost 1 less for each oil counter on Vindictive Flame Stoker. This has a lot of potential. Red decks want to refill their hand, and they want their spells to be very low mana cost. So Vindictive Flame Stoker I'd be interested in, trying in like a Pioneer Burn, Modern Burn kind of thing. Monument to Perfection is a 2-mana artifact. Search your library for a basic, sphere, or locust land card. So we've seen spheres, we haven't really seen locusts yet. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And then 3 mana, Monument to Perfection becomes a 9/9 Phyrexian construct artifact creature, loses all abilities, gains indestructible, toxic 9, activate only if there are 9 or more lands with different names among the basic, sphere, and I'm gonna assume locust land cards you control. So, 2 mana to turn into some ridiculous thing. This is kind of a interesting, assemble the pieces and get a huge threat kind of card. Rhea Ivor, Bane of Bladehold. Looks like the hero of Bladehold was completed, y'all. 1 black, 1 white, 2 other for a 3/4 Phyrexian Knight with Battle Cry. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, the next time target creature would deal combat damage to 1 or more players this combat, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, create that many 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with toxic 1, and this creature can't block. So instead of the combat damage that we were going to deal, we're going to go wide, and then we're going to use Battle Cry with Rhea Ivor to take advantage of the fact that we went wide, probably preventing the Rhea damage over and over again just to go wide and giving that Battle Cry to all your mites, and they have toxic 1 and they're dealing damage. Pretty interesting build. I like that. Loaded Contaminators, a 1 green, 2 other, trampling 4/4 with toxic 1, and when it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. This is very good. This will be played in whatever toxic deck emerges and will probably become one of the, poison cards that are absolutely in the Commander poison deck. Then finally, we've got Encroaching Microsynth, a blue, and 3 other non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. A little hard to read there. Turning everything into artifacts, this is so relevant in decks that want a feature like this, and it's true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So anything that is checking for artifacts, you are going to have Encroaching Microsynth have it find a ton of artifacts. Obviously I want to compare this to like Biotransference that was just released in the 40k stuff, but this one is permanents you control, permanent spells you control, non-land permanents you own that aren't on the battlefield, but it's not creating a 2/2 artifact also. Biotransference is just doing creatures, but in the history of time, we've also had Microsynth Lattice, this is kind of similar to permanents or artifacts in addition to their other types. Cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are colorless, and then players may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. Little different. Microsynth Lattice kind of goes a different direction, and it's 2 more mana, but Encroaching Microsynth just applying to you and giving you that ability. Pretty good card. That looks like all we have seen as far as when I shoot this video. This seems like a giant leak though, so we'll see what else pops up. If you're curious, this leak came from a YouTube channel that was opening up a box of Dominaria Remastered, and these cards were just inside it. So, you know, the famous quote comes to mind when I think of something like this. News is reporting information that somebody else doesn't want you to know, and everything else is just advertising. Advertising. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you when we're back from vacation. Bye!